Welcome to the Soul Touched by Dogs podcast, the show for dog lovers who see dogs not as toys or tools, but wise souls worth our respect and care. I'm Anke Herman, and I'm your host. I talk to pawsome humans, people who do great work for dogs and their people. So come and join us for today's conversation. Hello and welcome, Angie. I'm super happy to have you here today.
Thank
Both
you.
of you.
Yes, the boy, yes.
So why don't we start out as I always start out? Let people know where you're based and so what's your business with dogs?
I am basically a dog parenting coach, and I'm based in Columbus, Ohio, in the States.
Tell me about dog parenting coach. Who do you coach, the dog or the parent?
The parent. But what I coach the parent with is actually exactly how to guide your dog into happiness and good behavior. Yeah, you can't have one without the other. You know, a happy dog cannot be a well-behaved dog, and a well-behaved dog will not be happy unless you have both.
So what's the biggest mistake you feel people make that leads to, problem behaviors or frustration on both ends of the leash?
Well, the main concept when we're looking at a big picture, and I've been doing this for so many decades that, I've gotten to the nitty gritty and all the way to the big picture, which is what I cover in my book, Don't Train Your Dog. So the biggest problem and the biggest misunderstanding is viewing dogs from a dog training an animal type perspective, as opposed to parenting an emotionally entangled family member. So the mistakes happen when you view them as you're trying to train a wild or domesticated animal, because we're living with them in our homes as part of our families. They are part of our families. And so what's missing is being able to teach them modern family life skills that they need in order to be happy and well-behaved. And you don't get those with dog training.
So what's the biggest difference in the approach between, dog training and, and teaching my dog to live in a human household?
I think the easiest way to explain it is that dog training is for teaching tricks. Okay, so it's sit for a treat, go to the spot for a treat, off, down, those kind of things, right, for a treat. Or then you've got the super harsh obedience. So it's dog training equates to either a philosophy of fear in equals reaction out, or food in equals reaction out, right? But really, that's like treating your dog like a simpleton. They're so much more capable of so much more than that. And they have evolved to be entangled with us. Studies show that dogs are born to look to us for guidance, to look to us, to read our facial expressions, to read our eye movements, finger pointing, to locate objects, right? And so they've already got it. They're born with it. They don't learn that. They're born with it, right? So now that gives you a clue that we're entangled with them, right? They're born entangled to us. So now you take them and then you essentially pushing them out and treating them like, a wild or domesticated animal that you're training, instead of they know exactly how to use that entanglement to communicate with us, but we don't know that because we've been taught this dog training mentality all our lives.
That makes so much sense. It reminds me of little Leo there. He was like, yeah, I was like, well, you're way too smart for this, because he would do kind of anything I asked him when he could see the sense of it. Like he literally could see it in his little face. When there was a treat, he'd do it. But like if I asked him to sit, for example, he'd look at me and like, why? And if it made sense to him, then he'd do it. If he goes, well, I don't know, you're just making me jumping up and down, that makes no sense, he wouldn't do it. So there was always, I kind of got a sense for like, yeah, there's a lot more to him than meets the eye. So what's one to do instead?
Well, so you're exactly right when you say it needs to make sense to them, because that's how dogs see things. And that's what I explain in the book. is that um, learning how to communicate with them in a way that makes sense to them, not make sense to us, as in treat, sit, all this stuff. I'm not saying you never disagree with them. You guide them. No, not this, but yes, this, but there's a way you do it. And it has to make sense to them or they don't get it. So then you're wasting your time. You're confusing them. The human gets frustrated. The dog gets confused and scared a lot of the time. But if things make sense to them according to their natural wiring, and that's how my recipes and prescriptions are approached. If it makes sense to them, their natural wiring, then they got it. When it causes anxiety, when people are asking them to do things in a way that makes no sense to them according to their natural wiring or according to Mother Nature, what they've been given.
So, I mean, that's really funny because like Mrs. Mastiff here, has these very, like she's a guard dog. And boy, it's like it's really like her natural wiring is really prominent. Like when she takes her work so seriously, right? So, and you can't tell her not to guard, So, and
Right.
it's that piece of, hey, let's go in. It's okay. No, she'll come in. Like if
Right.
you try and kind of yell at her not to bark, she'll go like, "What are you saying? Like, don't you see that I've got work to do here, right?" So it's
Right.
like she's reacting quite differently from what the other two who are different breeds. Like that's really, yeah. So
Just
how
like
can
all
we?
kids.
Yeah,
Yeah. All
absolutely.
kids are different, but there's still some parenting philosophies that work pretty
Yes.
much across the board. Yes, you've got, the strong-willed, and then you've got, of human children. Well, dogs come with their own wiring too, but they're simpler, they're more simple in their philosophies in life and philosophies, you know what I mean, by their view of life,
Yes.
and their view of their current daily life and their current families and environments are everything to them. And so
Yeah.
when something's not according to what makes sense to them, it causes them great anxiety, right? And then you're seeing they're not understanding it, then you're seeing this aggression or whatever. But you can, or mostly fear and aggression, but you can guide your dogs. And what we do at Parenting for Dogs is guide your dogs in with these recipes and prescriptions into saying, yes, a dog has a reaction to guard, right? And only really in essence, an action can truly replace another action for a dog. So
Yes.
you have to say, no, I don't want you to do this at this time, but here's what I do want you to do. But it has to make sense. It has to be a lateral move to them, if that makes sense.
Mm.
See, it can't just be, hey, I want you to just sit there and not move for a second, or don't move a muscle under this duress, or here's a treat, they don't care about it. They're just still the urge to bark or whatever is more. I like my dogs to bark, but I want to show them bark when you go to the door, and then when I say all done, then that's enough barking. And dogs have the ability to make choices, to come up with ideas themselves and everything. They're just not given that chance, and people aren't seeing it because you cannot see the true ability of a dog in a group training class, a laboratory, or anything. You can only see those things, and those modern skills for family life can only be taught in a family environment when they're connected to a human that they trust and respect.
Mm.
But
I
then
think
you see the,
we
then you
talk.
see the full potential.
Yes. And I think what I hear you say is that we massively underestimate them. And I
Exactly.
think almost by asking them to do stuff that doesn't make sense, especially if you come from that like training and sit and plats and treat and whatever, like if you go, would it be fair to say that they don't really feel heard and understood, which probably impacts how much they trust us?
Well, yes, they have to respect us, and in order to do that, you have to be able to communicate with them in a way that makes sense to them. That relax here, I've got this. We're fine. Everybody's fine. Relax. That you're confident and firm. But with the prescriptions and the recipes, it's almost like once you see them, you're like everybody becomes confident because you're like, oh, I see the results of it immediately, and then the parent becomes confident. But the dog doesn't, what you're seeing is more like, it's not like, oh, she's underestimating me. But in dog terms, it's more like, in dog world, it's more like she's, that's not making sense to me. She shouldn't be doing that. And now I'm confused. And now I thought maybe, since I'm confused, I thought maybe she meant something else and she didn't. And that doesn't make sense to me. And now get frightened. Maybe I get frightened of her, Okay, maybe I get frightened of something that was, just happened to be happening at the same time. It feels like, this is sounding elaborate, but it's really very simple. And like once you just get it down to the what I call the five big stuff rules that we want dogs to that I concentrate on teaching dogs for modern family life, and then add that to that and balance that out with a full fulfillment. That any kind of guidance you give, no, not this, but yes, this, as long as it's given in an emotionally neutral state, then dogs understand it. And then they accept it and they can understand it. And you don't flip into fight or flight, and you don't flip into them just ignoring you and brushing you off because you're, of no consequence. You've got that, get that parenting sweet spot.
I mean, it's like funny, like it feels like it's not that different from parenting kids, right? So what are the 5 house rules?
Well, the 5 big, and I do want to say first, it is like parenting kids, because once I've done this for decades and decades, and I've fixed my skills, and my knowledge has come from just working with the worst of the worst cases, like fixing unfixable dogs that were, given up for euthanasia, or just nobody could handle them, nobody could be and so when you start with that bad, that all the other just normal daily life things are teaching dogs gets simple, because you did the worst of the worst. And then I did it for years and years and years, and so I finally realized that I am comfortable, and it is accurate to say I'm parenting the dogs, because I had two boys I was parenting at the same time. I realized I'm parenting them both, because my definition of parenting is providing love, guidance, love and guidance to vulnerable members of a family, right? So that includes them, right? But here's where the rubber meets the road. You want to give this love, support, and guidance to both kids and dogs, but the way you give it to dogs is completely different than you give it to kids, and that's where the misunderstandings happen.
Okay, so what should we do then?
Well,
so give us like a little recipe, like give us a bit of a taste,
okay, so it's hard, because even in the book we talk about how the first read on the book, which is basically a workbook, but it's got everything in it. It's got family stories and life stories with dogs, and humor, and the things that you come across with just in living with dogs and these incredible species that they are, and that they picked us to be entangled with, which is a privilege. So I'm saying we want to treat that privilege correctly by teaching them rules that they can use in modern family life, so that they don't lose their home, they don't bite kids, they don't do all these things, that they're only doing these things because they just don't understand what you're trying to teach them, because dog training does not work in their mind. It teaches them tricks. So the 5 big stuff rules that I focus on is, number 1, no aggression, no teeth on humans, because we accidentally have them touch us with their teeth, and then they get bigger or something happens, and then you're like, oh, don't bite me. Well, it's like we've just been teaching them to bite us the whole time, because we just allowed them to put their teeth on our hands, and we were playing with them, playing with their mouth or whatever. That's extremely unfair. Right now we're saying, oh, don't bite, or people parents teach dogs to sit for a treat, and then they're like, yeah, it's working, look how smart he is, right? And then they try to teach them not to bite a kid with the same way, right? And then it goes downhill very quickly, and the dog ends up losing its family and its home through no fault of its own, because they thought they could teach the family safety rules the same way they taught the tricks, and nothing could be farther from the truth. So, but you asked me what is one example.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll go off the board on dogs all day long. So
I love it.
So one of the recipes, for example, is the what's not allowed recipe. So it doesn't, you can't involve treats in the what's not allowed recipe, right? So you go out of your way other times, and for other things, to catch them having good behavior, to when they stop doing something you ask them not to do, and did the right thing, you overpraise them, then super excited. There's certain times you can use excitement voice, certain times you use treats, but in the what's not allowed, you can't. And part of it is you're not getting enough eye contact with the dog. So that recipe involves, you know, stopping the behavior, how to stop the behavior with a neutral mindset, perfectly calm, because I know the recipe, so I don't have to panic. I know what I'm going to do. You can even parents stop panicking about when their dog's going to do something because they know, here I'm watching the behavior, which we explain in the book. Look for this little behavior, look for this, you know, the way they turn their head like this, or they move a paw like this, or, you know, I teach how to look for those things. As soon as you see those, and that's called seeing the guidance moment, that's when you know you got to step in and provide the guidance. This guidance says no in a ways that dogs can understand, which is, you know, it kind of has to be built on in the book. No, I don't want you to do this. Okay. And then a little bit of eye contact for just 1 second, 1/1000, just let it sink in. Okay. Because it's not this distraction. You can't just distract them at that point with something they don't learn. Okay. So it's the eye contact because you have this relationship with them because they trust and respect you. You're not going overboard. You're emotionally neutral. Get the eye contact and then say, we don't, so that you say, we don't ever do that. But here's what we can do. And then you immediately switch to the, it's an incomplete teaching moment, not to do the what you do instead.
Yes.
Right. And that people think that's being taught by distraction, like this treat with distraction, and it's not. That's why it's going off the rails. That's why your trained dog is going off the rails.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So what kind of replacement behaviors, you know, especially like, okay, now let me use a real life example. Mrs. Guard Dog Leah, right? So she's got her front yard at night. She sits there on the porch and, you know, she takes her job very seriously. Every now and then, it's very cute actually. So every now and then she comes in, she nudges everybody, like for the other dog, you know, people, everybody here. Okay, so I can kind of go sit there. And then all of a sudden she will charge to the door because she heard something, right? So now when she alerts, well, fair enough, you know, obviously that's what you consider your job, fine. But it's almost like when it gets like you kind of ramping yourself up, you know, when she gets like, and I'm like, if I want to step in and say, okay, I've got you, you know, like you're good now, you've done your job, it's my job now. So if I'm standing there sort of in the front yard, you know, what kind of replacement behavior could I offer? And I do, in my experience, treats don't, like when they're excited, the treat's the last thing on their mind. Like she won't even want it. So I perfectly, you know, love that you're saying like treats not your answer for everything. So you know, how can I communicate effectively that you've done your job, you can kind of go now.
Right. I can tell you have experience with dogs because you know you understand that there's these subtleties that come in, right? You see all the subtleties, and those things have to be addressed, okay? And it's so much easier than you think, and it really is. You know, dogs see things in a very black and white way, right? Things are always allowed or never allowed, okay? And that's when you get to the safety rules or the 5 big safety rules I'm telling you about. This is never allowed, right? The thing you're talking about is if you want your dog to bark at the door or when somebody comes or to do that. First, you're correct. The dogs come in and like, that's when they're always like, that's how you're addressing separation anxiety too, is to understand that like when you come back and to understand what drives them on that, that's how you fix that. But she's coming in and checking to make sure everybody in the family is here. We're all together because that's what they want. They want it to be all together. We have to teach them that sometimes we leave and then sometimes we come back and to be fine with that. But they want us to all be together. So she's checking. So she really does believe that that's her job, is to check to make sure everybody's here and then to confront any dangers or strangers. So what you have to communicate to her is, listen, either you want her to do that or you don't. I don't want him to do that because that causes problems, right? I do want him to bark at the door, which is a little bit different because that's the hybrid, almost like a hybrid trick, because I do involve a treat in that I teach in the book to say, bark, bark, bark. Yes, go ahead and bark. But now when I say all done, then I give a treat for that, right? So that one does, once they're calm, I give a treat, not when they're barking, you know, not in the middle of it, right? When they've understood, I said, that's enough. You can stop now, you know. You can have the patience when you're sure about what you're doing. Ask the person at the door, sorry, we're having a training moment. Just one moment. Everybody's happy to help, but you're trying to rush to the door and get it normally. And then that causes you don't get to address or do your guidance or do your parenting because you're stressed about getting the door open. But really, if you pre-think these things like it says in the book, you're calm. You go there and you say, nope, hold on just 1 second. Just we're learning something here, learning some skills, and then address them when you get them completely stopped with that eye contact, then all done, and then you can give them a treat. So that teaches them from then on later, you do that few repetitions, and then when you say, they run to the door, bark, 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 you say, all done, when they do, and then they go back for their treat, so that's a little pseudo one where there is a treat involved in that one. The bigger concept of what you're talking about being outside is that you would have to step between her and the person or the stranger or whatever. Just block. I don't need you to protect me in that way, right? I protect our family, so you can relax. It gives her more relaxation. It gives her she can see that she's off duty, right? And so you have to be very clear, showing them that you can be off duty on this. I take care of this. I make sure everybody's fine. And, no family members are hurting other family members because I make sure everybody's fine. So that's what they need to understand. And if they trust and respect you, then they'll understand that when you say, I'll handle this, right?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Yeah.
So when you're afraid of a child or something, there's a whole dog, kind kids and confident canines recipe, right? So it's not exactly what people think it is, because they think, oh, I'm going to teach my kids to respect my dog. I'm not going to let them hurt my dog, and vice versa. But it's not as simple as that. It doesn't work that way, because the dog has a different view of what is happening, and the child has a different view of what's happening. Or a child may be a baby and can't do anything for itself, a toddler, So that's a bigger subject, and I do just discuss exactly how to fix that, exactly how to make that relationship happen. But I would say, for example, a substitute behavior like you were asking about, we're not going to, don't need to be scared. We're not afraid. We're not, aggressive at anything around this kids. I don't want that. But here's what I want you to do. Get that toy. Like, let's play with that toy around the kids. But you have to get the toy and play with it. Like it's the best thing you've ever done with the dog. Right. And then that's good girl playing with that instead. And then pretty soon you start seeing the choice being made, where when the kids start playing or getting rowdy, instead of them or being afraid, then they run and get their toy and play over on the side. Or, there's just so many things in the book. It's hard to get into all of them.
Do you have a copy there that you can just kind of hold up?
You know what? The book just came out yesterday. I was just thinking this, and I was like, I gave away my last physical copy. This is the front cover. The picture of it. It's called Don't Train Your Dog. It's at Amazon now, of course. But
awesome.
Our website is parentingfordogs.com with a number 4, parentingfordogs.com. So
I think I'm just gonna have to kind of go get that right now, because I'm totally intrigued. Because a lot of the stuff I actually I'm like, yeah, that's kind of like, that's my experience. Because when I go with those 2 big girls, when I'm out, that's exactly what I do. It's like when there's another dog or somebody's coming, and I will just kind of literally like, no, you go over here, and I'm between them, and they go, okay, whatever. So it's like, I've got you. This is like, I don't, so it's just like when they're actually here and they sort of hear something like another dog outside, it's almost like when there's nobody inside, so it's that but I'm sort of now really curious. Like, this is really interesting, because now I'm kind of really curious to find out, what are the signals that I'm missing. And actually the other one is she, like, I always have a toy with me. I never take treats, because neither of them are interested in treats on walks, right? But I always have a toy, right? Because like this other one, she is literally, when she gets excited, first thing, she turns around and grabs the toy. So that's like, that's what I taught her when she was little, and that's what she does to this day. When she gets riled up, her reaction is get the toy. So it's really easy, and I can almost gauge her excitement level by how if she's like, okay, so she's not even excited. If she's really excited, she just fully goes for it, right? But it's like you can level her, you can gauge her excitement level. And it's also really easy to redirect, because she'll go for the toy, and then whatever, the cat or whatever kind of excites her is just like no longer of interest.
Right. So so you saw a piece of what I'm talking about, right? So you're like a lot of people who have worked with dogs, and a lot of people have their hearts in the right place saying, I'm going to just distract them or try to give them a treat all the time. And those are involved. But the timing of when you're doing those and expecting those to do it solely by themselves, treats and distractions by themselves will not do it.
No.
Fear and harsh obedience will not do it. Only this, parenting for dogs, middle guidance, sweet spot will do it.
Yeah.
Right. And so you've experienced some of what I'm saying, and you're like, you're almost there. Like there's just like 20% that, like, say people who have experience with dogs like you, they're almost there usually. And there's about 20% that though is so different that it'll put you over the edge to what you're like, oh, okay, this has been what's missing, right?
Yeah.
Is when what's missing. I'm almost there, and you can feel and you can see some things work, and then they don't work, and then other things don't work, but this does. Why does it work on one dog and not on the other? There's just 20% about missing from what you need to know to bring it all the way home, right?
Ooh,
and
I can't wait now.
and this you can't find this anywhere else, because
Yeah.
I've developed this over 25 years that I've been working with it. And I just kept constant notes and constant video. So there's a video companion, a digital companion that goes with this book. So in the introduction, you don't have to use the videos. But people who want to use the videos, there's a QR code, and it comes free with the book. And you just scan the QR code with your phone. If you'd like to, you're reading the first chapter, if you'd like to see what I talked about in the real chapter or see me doing it in real life with dogs, you can go to that, but everything's really self-contained in the book. You don't have to do that, the digital companion, if people don't want to. But also there's a lot of other resources will be at the website, the Parenting for Dogs website too, that has like, a community of tell your dog parenting stories and how you work this out. I read the book and then I worked this out that I didn't have. And then that helps other dog parents.
Yes.
So it's just like parenting kids, that we all learn from what we've learned from other moms and dads. So it's like that. But the problem is, especially even after COVID, even before that, dog behavioral problems were skyrocketing, and their dogs are being given up in record numbers to shelters. And it's all because of what's missing in this book. And so had to make the book. I couldn't stop. And, that's why it's taken decades. I've had videos and stuff before that, and I've been working on it forever. But now I had to exclusively go to putting everything from all my decades of work into this one place, so that I can finally push it over the line and get people to see, and stop this problem that's happening, that's completely avoidable. And
I think
dogs
that
are
almost makes it worse, right? When you kind of see that it is actually fixable, so it's almost like, well, then, part of this conversation and any other conversations I hope we have, to really get this in as many hands as of people we can, because every dog parent who understands their dog better, will basically diminish or like eliminate the risk of that dog ending up being
dogs
given
losing their
up.
homes or kids being
Yeah.
bit, and it's it's haunted me ever since I started figuring it out, and I was like, oh man, this is just a colossal misunderstanding, and we're seeing them from this dog training standpoint instead of what they actually are, and what they're actually capable of, and what they're thinking, and reading us, and what we're totally missing it on most regards. And then I see dogs just losing their homes and suffering, and dogs are paying a brutal price for this misunderstanding. What I say is, like, you've got the harsh obedience, or would never use treats or anything, and then you've got the only treats and distractions, and then they're battling each other, and all these parents are being caught in the crossfire. And so then you're afraid to make a move. And what I talk about in the book is this parental paralysis by analysis has made our dogs are paying a brutal price for that.
Yes.
Right. It's not parents' fault. It's not their fault, because the information is just not out there until now. So imagine if you were in my spot and I knew I could stop it, and I knew I could save all these dogs, and I've been saving dogs this whole time, but now I got to save millions instead of thousands. Then, I don't sleep at night.
I bet. I bet. Yeah, and I think it's
the
just,
only reason why, it's crazy to continue doing something against all odds for 28 years. But if you knew you could stop this suffering, you couldn't stop either, right? And I knew I could, so I couldn't stop. So it's it's been quite the journey.
I think, well, you do. He's like, I love your energy around this and I love the passion behind it. As I'm almost like, I'm going to turn around and get that book right now.
Thank you. I know.
And I think I would love to have you back because it's, it's definitely, the impact be massive, because it's the dogs are the ones on the receiving end, but I think the people who wanted the dog for the connection and don't manage to kind of find this place of understanding. So it's kind of
Right.
bad for everyone, right?
It is.
So
But
and so if there is a solution, then let's make sure everybody gets their hands on it.
there's absolutely a solution. Absolutely. And it's not hard what people think. There isn't just, there's no magic and mystery. It's like, if you read the book and you see, you're like, you're led to believe, like typical dog training shows and books and things like that, tend to water things down and make them look easier or more effective than they really are, right? Because it's a show, it's entertainment, right? And then the whole time it's killing me because that's not going to help. That's making you think something, oh, well, I've got the only dog that can't be fixed. I've got the one with the problem that can't do this because everybody else seems to be able to fix it with this, when really they're not. They're struggling as much as you are as a dog parent. So that's what's so heart-wrenching about it, is that I've watched all this happen, and knowing that I'd be able to fix it, but I had to get it into a form, because it's got to be easy enough. It's got to be usable in daily life. It's got to fit right into your family life, whether your family is you and your dog, or, what we say, or you're a member of the Brady Bunch. It works in all environments, all families. And so it's one thing for me to know how to do it, but it's a whole nother thing I had to get it simple enough and
Yeah.
easy enough, effective enough that everybody can do it, right? That it's not a mystery. There's no, like, just some certain people people see me do it and they're like, oh, that's just because you're great with dogs. It's like, I learned this. I learned it. I figured out how to do it, and then I learned it, and then I teach other people, and they're effective too. Yes. I mean, I've worked with the worst of the worst cases that most dog parents are
How
never
did
going to see.
I mean? Look, I was gonna like. I know I'm gonna sort of mess up the timing here, but I just can't help myself. Like, how did you get to a place like nobody would trust the most difficult cases to me? Like, it's almost, and I'm not like a newbie, right? But it's like, how did you get into a situation where you ended up working with these really difficult, cases?
Yeah, it started out, I mean, this was not intending to be my life. I was, raising two young boys, and I started volunteering. I knew, I'd always done some dog training. And then when I realized a couple of things, like that dog training doesn't work for that, when it was like, my dog became afraid of my toddler, and it didn't work. The other stuff doesn't work. And I'm not getting rid of my dog, and I'm not letting my child get bit either. So I was forced into figuring it out. Like, I had to figure it out. I was desperate. And then I just kept, like, there wasn't anything to read. I kept looking for it. No answers there, So then I just started figuring it out by tiny pieces of things I would learn, or just about animal behavior. My whole childhood, I spent, basically outside with animals, watching animals. I've always been, interested in animal behavior and drawn to that. My whole life has been about that. And,
But being in the situation where you needed to find a situation,
so
I think that's a powerful driver, right? To really
yeah,
go
and so
deep.
yes, it was. And so then I just started when I figured out how to do a lot of it, I was like, oh, that dog training doesn't even work. What everybody thinks is going to work doesn't work, and that's why all this is happening. And then I'm watching in these rescues. I didn't work for one rescue. I volunteered to help train at that time dogs that couldn't be adopted yet because they weren't, so because I had figured out some things. Then I just saw this epidemic of dogs developing all these behavioral issues, fears, aggression, and, basically our whole society's inability to prevent or cure them. And then I was distraught. So then I thought, there has to be answers. Like, there are answers to things that make sense. There's a natural order of things. There's a natural thing, things can be, just because we don't know the answer yet doesn't mean the answer doesn't exist. So
Yeah.
since I couldn't find it, I couldn't find it out there already. I had to figure it out myself. So then I started taking worse and worse and worse cases. And then pretty soon vets or other rescues started, knowing it's like, Angie, let's see if we can get it to Angie, but I could only do so many dogs at a time. So,
Mm.
I had that dilemma all the time. But then I started recording it, the behavior, just so that I could help the rescue folks. Here, if you come upon this, help this. Well, then it just snowballed until I did case after case after case after case, 100 dogs. So then by the time you've done that many and you've done it for that many years,
you can see the patterns, right? You can see what reliably works.
I had a file of notes like that big, from just like a 5-year period, and then another 5 years, and then another 5 years, and then video. And then I started turning it into systems. And then I started turning it into videos with systems. And then I turned it into the book and got it all into the forms of recipes and prescriptions. So it's a 25-year journey, but the part that is missing about that, and that's a way longer story for it, is that I was struggling during that period of time with a devastating medical condition. And I basically lost my life. I was on the last hours of my life, and I was a recipient of a miracle, and it's a long story. And then I woke up and I realized that dogs are the reason why I got to live. My work with dogs. And so I said, I've spent my entire life since that moment trying to repay them for everything they did for me, everything they taught me, and everything they do for humanity. So that's the reason why I've done this for 28 years, because I can't stop. I owe it to them.
Love it so much. Do you want to repeat I'm all teary now, so thanks, mate. Do you want to repeat the name of the book one more time?
Yes. Don't Train Your Dog. It's a pet parenting to teaching good behavior, calming fear, and raising happy dogs.
Love it. Well, thank you so much. I think we definitely have at least another conversation in here or a masterclass. So please let this not be the last time we speak.
Absolutely.
Thank you for today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review so other dog lovers can find the show. If you haven't already, head over to soultouchedbydogs.com and sign up for weekly doggy cuteness, tips, recommendations, and personal stories to warm your dog-loving heart. And if you know a awesome human you think I should interview, I'd love an introduction. Email me at Anke, that's ANKE, @soultouchedbydogs.com.